how to spot invisible risk before you buy a business. That's the question every buyer should be asking, because invisible risk is what kills deals after you close, not before. And today, we're breaking down exactly how to spot it before you wire a single dollar. Most buyers obsess over financial due diligence, P&Ls, tax returns, add backs, the usual, but the risks that sink acquisitions are rarely found in QuickBooks. They're hidden in people, culture, processes, clarity, and the day-to-day reality employees are living through. In this episode, you'll learn how to use diagnostics, interviews, and culture data to uncover the truth, who actually runs the business, whether the team knows the strategy, and where the real operational landmines are buried. If you're serious about buying a business, this is how you avoid the surprises that destroy deals. Let's get into it.
The worst score that we get across the board, consistent with every single client, is knowing the strategy. The people who are doing the work on a day-to-day basis do not know the strategy. And for the very few who know the strategy, when we ask them the follow-up question, which is, how do you apply that in your day-to-day work? We get near zero on that. A great strategy is a future version of your company for the customers that you want. And it should function as a decision-making rubric on a day-to-day basis, on a transaction-to-transaction basis for the people doing the work. It should not be ambiguous. Been around large business, small business, medium business for about 30 years. Started my career in the corporate world, did that for about 20 years, and realized that I would probably be better off working on my own. So started a firm, worked with startups for a little while, learned that toolkit, figured out they don't do such a good job at paying you, swung the pendulum over to the other side, started working with billion-dollar businesses. And you kind of get lost in the sauce there. Also, I found that the people running those organizations weren't as people-focused and weren't as interested in the value that the people could create for the firm. And so where I ended up is swinging the pendulum to the middle. And so now we work with mid-market firms and in many ways perform some of the duties of private equity without actually doing the acquisition piece. So we're looking at diagnosing, we're looking at understanding, we're looking at knowing the people and what's the ground truth of a business so that we can remove friction and help them grow.
Okay, so kind of simplify that a little bit. What do you guys do?
Sure, we we help companies grow, and it's not just in the marketing and sales function. It's also in removing the friction from the processes that you're going to need to repeat at scale. Right. So the simplest way to say this is we are a scaling service, and then our toolkit really is adapted to whatever the client's situation is. So if they don't have any business intelligence, they have no data markers, they have lousy data hygiene, we tend to want to attack that because that's the fuel for automation and AI. But if they have a great culture, right? So let's say that they're willing to change and then people are open to things, we're able to help harness that and get that apparent and unearth that and uncover those opportunities so that the people that are actually running the company can go, oh, I can understand that. I can leverage that. And then we help them do that if they choose to work with us.
And how do you do that?
Sure. First step in almost every situation is a diagnostic. So whether we're looking at their, a bespoke operational process that we're looking at with the theory of constraints, or we're saying, should you be doing this in-house? Is this something that you could outsource potentially? We use a diagnostic to methodically go through the moving parts of the business. So we have really kind of 8 main diagnostics that we use depending on what the needs of the business are. And most of the time, it's a really nice augmentation for operational due diligence. But just to give you an example, we did a 3.5-week assessment for a company on 36 checkpoints for their sales process. So we have lots of things that we can check in the sales process, but we go through that with the owner of the company first and say, what do you really want to look at? And they're like, this doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. This is what I want. So we sort of tailored their sales process assessment. We got them a report card out of that. And even though the findings were not pleasant, the executive said, I want to fix these 3 things. And we told them, look, that number 3 thing on that, you should fix yourself. You want that in-house, but we'd love to help you with 1 and 2. So we get a report card.
Give me like more like specific. So where is the process that they were trying to fix, and where are those three things? Like,
Sure.
yeah.
Yep. Manufacturing firm based in the West Midwest. And they have a capital equipment sales process. And the process was not well documented. The process did not have the right sales stages in their CRM. It was not supported by materials that espoused the things that made that company unique. There was not a clearly defined ideal client profile. They did not have then, therefore, a matched unique value proposition for that ideal client profile. And so this was among the, I don't know, 16 interventions that we were suggesting, where you need to know yourself, you need to know who you're selling to, their pain points. And so we specifically went in and started creating sales assets for them. We documented the sales process. We've updated their CRM, and now we're working on adoption management with them. So we're currently in the middle of helping them promote now the usage of the assets and the sales process as documented.
And so you do that with them?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
how do you get their sales team to listen to you to, kind of like implement the tools that
yeah,
you're
it's a
proposing?
great question. Uh, we have the least amount of resistance, or the least amount of resistance from sales teams. I heard it explained once that sales teams are coin operated. If they see that it's valuable, if they see that there's a potential for closing more deals and faster, they just adopt. They're miraculously good at adopting. You still have to monitor this stuff. But if you explain to them, you recording the sales event, you recording, I had this call, this was what was covered, or better yet, doing it online and recording it, means that that's the completion of the task. And then that information, we're going to give it back to you as analytics. They adopt like that. We really have almost no adoption friction from sales teams.
Nice. Okay.
It's
And
great for us.
yeah. So let's think from an operational standpoint. Where are some of the what does the diagnosis look like? What does that process look like? And what do you focus on?
Yeah. So let's say that you're trying to figure out, pardon me. Let's say that you're trying to figure out why my throughput isn't as high as it should be, right? So we have a diagnostic called Atlas, and Atlas is a bit of checking everything, right? It's like if you were to bring your car into the shop, they hook the computer up to it, and they're like, all right, this is in order, the stuff that's wrong. Operationally, we ask a question that has proven to be one of our favorite questions, which is, do you have all the tools you need to do your job excellently? And if we get anything other than a 9 or a 10 on that, we say, what would make that be a 10? And we get a list. And this list, so we did this for a company of about 1,000 people a few years back. This list included things that took about $3 to fix. This list included things that were, insanely expensive. But there's a huge chunk of this list that you can just fix. You can write a check and fix it. And if you do it right, you can use it as a cultural buffer.
Mhm.
What you're doing there is you're saying every 2 weeks, hey, remember you guys took that survey? We just fixed that thing. And then you get this good news machine going. And so the people understand, hey, these guys listen to us. And then what also happens is they actually start, you remove friction from them doing their jobs. So
Yeah.
that's one example of what's in Atlas that helps us with almost any part of the company, which is just it's a disarmingly simple question, and people love answering it.
Yeah. So let's say someone is buying, a service business, and let's just say an HVAC business. They have 50 technicians, they have salespeople, they have admin staff. How can they use, so how would you think, let's say you're buying the company, how
Yep.
do you think about due diligence, in general,
Yeah, sure.
aside from the finance side?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So we do have a we have a PE facing offering, but let's just say Jay, you're going to give me a briefcase with $10 million, and I could buy a company for up to 9 million. I have $1 million to plow into it.
Yeah.
The first thing I'd want to know is, what's the upside to this business that's not apparent in legal, tax, financial due diligence, right? So like, What am I missing? And so this is what Atlas does. Atlas tells you, look at all this upside, or it tells you this is a big problem and this might be a poison pill in here culturally. This might be a poison pill in here structurally. So we ask people, do you know your career path? It's a very simple question. Just, do you know your career path? Not, are you enjoying it? Do you feel great about the company? It's like, do you know it? If you get a number that's less than 30% of people knowing their career path, I'm going to tell you have a problem. You, as the buyer, me as the buyer, can choose to fix that or walk away and go, God, fixing that culturally is too much of a pain. That's not the business we're in. Or you say, are you telling me that I can get like my retention to go up, all of these other metrics that we track against that will all go up if I fix this one problem? Yes. So if you're in a competitive bid situation, you'll see a hidden upside that they won't know about. And so they might bail on an extra, 2% on the deal, whereas you can afford this all day because your upside based on the diagnostics is telling you if you fix 2 problems, this thing's going to hum. So
Okay.
it is really, it's uncovering the hidden stuff that people miss because a lot of times they're just industry experts, right? So if I'm buying a manufacturing company, my operational due diligence, I'm bringing in the manufacturing guy. Well, the manufacturing guy may not know all of the research that we did for 6 years to build this thing, right? Because ours is designed around what makes a business function, not what makes a manufacturer function.
So this is mainly like a survey that goes to the employees and the exec in the team. I'm assuming supervisors are included, managers are included in that survey. Is there a difference between employees and surveys? And then do you correlate the KPIs of the business? Do you take on the data of the business from an operational standpoint and match it? Because, if you're asking somebody what is your path, and then, let's say 40% or 30%, 40% tell you, I don't know, but they still have a high retention rate, in terms of employees, then now you have 2 data points, not just one on its own. So how do you kind of like, number one is, kind of like how do you, let's start with that. Like, how do you connect the data, the
Yep.
KPIs of the business with the survey info?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. There's a couple things that happen simultaneously. One is we're getting a baseline, a one-time look, a snapshot of your organization on those days. So let's say a normal Atlas is going to take about 4 weeks. We're going to do a digital survey that goes out to everybody. And one of our first indexing questions is, are you a manager here? Do you have people that report to you? And another one of our indexing questions is, are you an executive, right? So you can be an executive without direct reports, and you could be an executive with direct reports, and you understand the permutations.
Yeah.
This fact finding for us, this indexing against the rest of the information, is very useful to us because it also gives us a sense of whether or not the executives and the managers have a different perception of the business than the people actually doing the work. Now, coupling this and moving this into the conversation about how do we tie this to the business metrics, it has to be longitudinal. And the reason is because all we have is a point in time. So in our perfect scenario, 9 months to 12 months out from the first Atlas, we do a second one. And we should be able to show you exactly where these things tie. It's human beings. So when I say exactly, I'm here to tell you that those are the things that we know are related. We cannot tell you degrees. There's no way to say, oh, your turnover went down specifically because you fixed career pathing. Plus, you're not going to just fix career pathing. You're going to fix whether or not people know the strategy and believe in it. You're going to fix whether or not their managers are checking in with them on a biweekly basis with quantified feedback, right? So these are the questions that we ask because it turns out the people doing the work are the way that your business works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how is the survey to the employees different than the survey with the executives?
There's a little bit of branching, but it's not a ton different. One of the things that we will ask executives is kind of a level of confidence question or your preparedness questions. So we look at things as strategy, execution, right? People and process, right? And the people and process thing is kind of like implied in execution, but we're really we have specific language in there saying, how capable do you think you are? And then how much of that capability do you think your company is experiencing? We don't really ask that of the front line, but that's just one example of branching. There's not a ton of branching in this. And the reason is because it allows us to better index the data. So if you have a company with, say, 50 people, you're going to buy an HVAC company, understanding who's in the field and who's not. I mean, I should be able to eyeball that almost with the statistics that come back, but understanding that and understanding how do they feel about home office, or we would ask a question. So we reserve a spot for 2 to 3 extra questions when we know the exact type of business. We would ask a question like, do you think we would branch it? So you're in the home office. Do you think that people in the field value the home office? And then when you're asking, when somebody says, oh, I'm in the field, you say, do you think that people in the home office value the contribution of the field? That asking them about somebody else's perception is a fantastic tool in surveying.
Interesting.
But there's a second piece after the digital survey, which is the interviews. So we don't just believe what's in the digital survey, we actually conduct interviews. And the reason we do that as well is because we want to make sure that everybody understood the questions and things like that. So we conduct interviews. We give a digital survey to everybody. We would conduct interviews on a team of 50, probably conduct interviews on like 15 people, right? Making sure we get a couple of field people, a couple of office people, like, depending on how split up the company is. But we want a good cross section to triangulate the results.
Okay. And so what are give me some interesting questions and then also some findings.
Oh boy. Well, again, skipping over the tool question because it's a dog's breakfast of answers, right? You get all of these wildly different answers in there. We ask people, how frequently does your manager check in with you with quantified information about your performance? So the amount of research on this is astounding. And the amount of people that we have who say they never check in or they check in once a year for the performance appraisal is equally astounding. It is just unbelievable. So research will tell you 11 days is the sweet spot. I don't know how they came up with that, but we say about every 2 weeks. If your manager says, hey, we're going to do a 15-minute check-in. If you're a manager and you have a team of 10 and you can't do a 15-minute check-in with each person individually every other week, you need an assistant. B, maybe you shouldn't be a manager.
Yeah.
But making that time, 15 minutes of being heard and seen and to know where you stand. Most people in a company can't answer the 2 basic questions, which are, how am I doing? What do I do next? If they can answer those 2 questions, your company actually works reasonably well. But we find that a lot of people don't know how to answer, how am I doing? And then therefore, it's much harder to ask, what do I do next? Mm-hmm. So that's one question. And what we see there as well is that's where we get a lot of adoption friction. So if we're going to do an intervention and we say, look, your managers, they're just not checking in with quantified information, we end up usually getting to the point where it's like, well, we don't really have great quantified information.
Correct. Okay? That's usually, yeah.
Now you're at a root cause.
Yeah.
And when you get to a root cause, we absolutely have the fix for that, right? We have a great BI team. But the reality is that people aren't even asking these questions. And so without those things known, that level of due diligence that you're looking for, it's missing that key component of like, are these things even going to stick?
Yeah.
We do ask people, how proud are you to tell friends and families that you work at this company? That for us is a great question, not because it's like chest pounding or like somebody's going to feel bad. It tells us a lot about their change tolerance. So when we get into a company and their average is north of 7 on a 10 scale for that, where like a lot of people are really proud to work there and tell people that they are, their change tolerance is through the roof. They're like, yeah, we want to make this place better, like rah. And that correlates to our response rates. Our lowest response rate for a digital survey has been 72%. Your target for a corporate survey is 25 to 60%. Like people, they just generally kind of don't care a ton about that stuff. Yeah, I mean, we've never hit 100. Like that's insane. But like our bottom, the worst response rate we've ever gotten was 72%. That correlated with one of our, worst pride in brand indexes. And so what we've been able to do over time is track these. And what we see is that that's a proxy for change tolerance. But we have one more question that I think you'll like as
Yeah.
somebody with a marketing mind. We ask people, what do you wish your customers knew about your company? This is some of the most authentic marketing fuel you can buy, because what's going to happen is it's a story about your company. And when you get recurring themes in there, now with AI, I mean, back in the day, we were doing this without AI. We were reading every response. We still like to read every response, but if you get 1,000 responses, it's going to slow you down. But you can theme this stuff, and you can go, if there were three things that I could honestly say about this company, they're in these 700 responses.
Yeah.
Or in the case of the HVAC company, they're in these 40 responses. It's here. And it's a gold mine for the marketing team.
Yeah, that's huge. And a lot of times those messages are not in the marketing or in the website or anywhere. Right? I mean, they should be
Nobody's
upfront.
asked,
Yeah.
right? Nobody's asked
Yes.
them, and it's a deceivingly good question. We also ask at the end. These are all free form questions at the end, but like, what one thing would you change if you owned the company? Right, and we get a lot of great insights from there, and sometimes, especially in a service business, you'd be surprised at how much they care about like the paint job or the cleanliness of the van.
Yeah.
You're like, and it goes again and again. Like, I wish our vans didn't look like they went through a war zone.
Yeah.
Okay, then yes, I would like to help you with that. And of course, that's sometimes where you get into this stuff though, where it's a bit more expensive, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about the questions. The questions are super useful.
So you mentioned something about the tolerance for change. So that's a really good indicator. What other indicators do you look at?
We look at work mix. So we find out if people are working primarily on projects or transactions. So if you want to think about the payroll for a company, if 98% of your payroll is designed to run the business and 2% is designed to change the business, and you sit around wondering every year why the business isn't changing, well, I can point to you a statistic for this. But additionally, when people tell us that they're working on projects and transactions throughout the day, we know they're getting murdered in switching costs. And sometimes parsing that work differently gives you a better look at what your org's designed to do. Do you have the systems, job aids, and tools to do your job very well? I know I'm just looking at the results here from an old client. Leadership and culture are consistent with our mission and values. Do you have a customer journey map to help you design services? Right. So we're asking these questions because we know how important these things are to creating value in a firm. This is a bank of maybe 200 questions that we usually skinny down to about 60. And even those are parsed. Most people get through the survey in about 7 to 9 minutes. And then the interview takes about 15. The interview is a much shorter question bank, but we're also getting a feel for what are people's energy levels there. So my interviewers have the questions that they're asking, and then they have these meta questions sitting underneath, like, how's this person's energy level 1 to 10? Do they seem like they're holding back? Right. So we get this other information that's really, really useful, because if people are trusting, they're brand positive, and their change tolerance is high, you can get away with a lot of change if you've earned their trust as a purchaser.
Yeah.
Right. If you've earned their trust. And so we look at stuff like that. We look at whether or not teams are rewarded for cooperating. Right. So sometimes when we ask that question, like, are teams rewarded for cooperating in your organization? People are like, no, this is where silos live. We don't do that here. Like, we compete readily all of the time. Has your manager ever asked you what your dream job is? It's a great question, right? And when we get no's, we understand where the discord is for most people in believing that their contribution is going to be valued and believing this is a place that they can stay and grow. Yeah, but
that's really interesting. So because we go from because there are some questions around the perceived engagement or value, and that help with retention. So you have these retention questions, and then you have these change management tolerance, questions, and then what other type of questions, so we have the retention piece, change management. What else? Like if you kind of group them.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. So I would say that from our standpoint, the groupings of these
Yeah.
are. I'm gonna pull something up that'll be
Yeah.
easier for me to tell you kind of a more summarized version of this. But we did this. Wow, this one's from 2001, 2021. Sorry. Uh, what we were able to do for this client was look at things like management experience. This is a decent sized client, right? 1,000 people. Um, but we look at strategy. So, do people know the strategy? Right. So, this great saying that somebody taught me a long time ago, which is if people don't know the strategy in your organization, it's not going to come true.
Yeah.
And so, even when we had a cult like company here that we were interviewing, nobody knew the strategy. And what we figured out the root cause of that was is because they didn't have one.
Mm.
Right. And so we ask a lot of questions. We don't ask a lot of questions. We ask some questions around strategy. We ask questions around measurement. So do you have a forecast for how much work you're going to have next week? Do you know how you're doing? Are you able to access that information on your own? Right. So we ask about those measurement questions.
KPIs.
Yeah, precisely. And, that's the frequent weakness, which was another reason we really enjoyed standing up the BI part of our business.
Yeah.
People, which was the thing that you and I were just talking about, like what are the cultural affects and those things. Then finally, execution. Like, so this is not just toolkit, but what are the things that you have in place to make this better? Like, do you have any automation or bots to help you do your job? Does the system tell you your next step once you've completed something? Right. So things that actually assist in people making progress and quickly and not getting decision fatigue, not having an abundance of cognitive load to get done what they need to get done for the day.
Okay. So
But
essentially, do they know where they're going? Do they have a strategy to get there? Do they have the tools to get there? Do they know how to measure if they're close or not close? And then do they have enough? Is there a culture and there is that will keep them there?
yeah, role clarity is a great one, right? So when we ask people like, do you know what's expected of you?
Yeah.
It's like you would think that everybody is like, yeah, and
Yeah.
they're not. They're just not.
Right.
Again, I'm looking at the results from a confidential client, but like out of 100, they had an 18.28 on their role clarity. And that's
Wow.
like, it was a financial services business, and 2/3 of the people were in the exact same role. And that's what their score was. Like,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So, knowing this stuff is one thing. Knowing how to act upon it is the other thing, right? So
Yes.
what we obviously don't do is we don't ask a bunch of questions that we don't know how to fix.
Yeah.
But there are instances where we find something out with the client and we're like, this isn't us. This is you. You need to fix this because you want to keep the know-how in-house. Or in other instances, we've even said, look, this might benefit from you having a conversation about custom software. And that's not it, right? We do not do custom software. I have great people in my network who do that, but we stay in our lane, right?
Yeah.
But we do tend to ask questions like, do you get quantified feedback? Does your paycheck go up when the company does well?
Yeah. Alignment.
Yeah, exactly. Because when people feel like, well, the company's making tons of money and my paycheck never changes, their motivation drops.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It makes
there's,
sense. And it's
yeah,
really interesting because kids and I are listening to this Business Wars episode, and he's talking about the struggles of Starbucks. And it started with that period when Starbucks started to unionize.
yep,
And Schultz came back and tried to squash. And a lot of this conversation is around, the company's generating this much revenue and the employees are not making as much money. And so they have this perception of employee work conditions. And so
yep,
and a lot of it is cultural. A lot of it is they had like 4 CEOs in 3 years. And so obviously the strategy is not clear. They themselves at the
yeah,
shareholder level, they don't know what the strategy is. So it's a lot of this, even at the highest, the biggest, the largest companies. So the smallest companies are not going to be an exception. So when you think of those 4 or 5 verticals the groupings, which ones have you seen, like obviously the KPIs is probably very common. Which ones have you seen the most common issues, and then how do you help these companies solve these problems?
Yeah. So the worst score that we get across the board,
Okay.
consistent with every single client, is knowing the strategy. The people who are doing the work on a day-to-day basis do not know the strategy. And for the very few who know the strategy, when we ask them the follow-up question, which is, how do you apply that in your day-to-day work? We get near zero on that. A great strategy is a future version of your company for the customers that you want. And it should function as a decision-making rubric on a day-to-day basis, on a transaction-to-transaction basis for the people doing the work. It should not be ambiguous, right? So like a long time ago, Pepsi's slogan, because it wasn't a strategy, they said it was a strategy, it was beat Coke. Like, that's great. So if I'm sitting there and I'm answering the phone in dispatch for my Pepsi bottler driver, what am I doing to beat Coke? Like, I don't understand that.
Yeah.
But if you said beat Coke by being the easiest distributors to work with on the planet, oh, now I have something, right? Just a little tiny qualification that gives me a decision-making rubric. But our highest score on no strategy is a 4.
Wow.
It's out of 100.
Wow. So how do you help companies, clarify, well, clarify their strategy? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't have one, but let's just say clarify it and then communicate it to each of the roles, because obviously the way you communicate it to, in your example, the distributor, bottler, person is different than it is to the merchandiser and to the guys in the facility. So how do you kind of help companies communicate that strategy?
Yeah, we have a module that we like to use that comes in 2 parts. The first part is, after we've declared they either have a strategy or they don't, right? That refinement and packaging to prove that the communication pathways exist. So part 1 is what we would call a barium test, right? So like when you get an X-ray, they give you some barium or something, you could see every blood vessel and all of the places it goes. This is like that. It's less dependent on what the strategy is. It's more of are the pathways in place for you to repeat this until you're so sick of hearing yourself say it that they finally heard it, right? What we have found is time and again, your executive team thinks that everybody knows the strategy because you've had 100 conversations about it, but they've had 0 or they've had 1. Right? It was rolled out. Everybody was like, oh, here's our strategy. Great. And then it has to be reinforced.
Yeah.
So we check the communication pathways in module 1. In module 2 is, if you're interested, we build out a proper strategy with you. So this is the entire marketplace research, trends research, your core competencies. Like, I love when clients tell us, we're the best at this. We're like, great. How are you benchmarking that? And they're like, what do you mean? We're like, we've always just been the best at this. Well,
Yeah.
I'm a data guy, and you need to be able to come with some data. Now, if you tell me we do surveys every year and we keep coming back as the #1 brand in this thing, I got you. That's great. But we do the research. We complete the research. We create a game board. We put your competitors up. We graph where they're weak and where you're strong and where you're weak. So there's a big thing to do in there. But then when it's done, you've got something that then has to still be condensed into what we'll call like mouth portable sound bites. Because if you're not able to relay this information, which is why we do module 1 first, because if we do all of this work, but there's no way to distribute it, that's so stupid. Like, I built the greatest car on the planet, but it's next to a volcano and there's no roads there. Like,
Yeah.
great. So how does anybody get this? So that's how we fix it. We first check for the communication pathways, and then we actually build a strategy to use those pathways.
So how do you fix the pathways? Let's just say, there's a business with 100 people and it's a culture that's been there for 30 years. They don't really have, really good communication.
Yep.
Ownership has been there for a long time. They've been doing the same thing. The management have been there for a long time. They think they know how to do things. How do you change that piece?
Uh, our favorite way is with test and control groups. So if I have 50 people in the field doing HVAC work, I pick five, right? And we figure out how do they consume information? What's their demographic? So we think of them way more like customers. Like we have a marketing mind for everything that happens in a company, right? The customers of your company are the people doing the work,
Yeah.
right? The customers they serve are the people paying you. But if you don't take care of that first customer group, your employees, then you don't really have a shot with the other ones. So what we do is we understand them as customers. How do they consume information? How frequently are they doing it? What are they comfortable with? What are their expectations? And then we design something that's going to work for that. So in some cases, again, financial services company, they have to log on to a system every day. But there's a place for messaging there. And then there's other places for messaging there. And then we got them koozies that had like on their desk where they were able to see this. So we started to reinforce things like it was still work in person to a large extent, even though this company that I'm talking about was 12 months post COVID. They were still in the office. They were still doing these things. They sent out care packages. They sent out, like, it was just really reinforced. And the next thing you know, this intervention, I mean, we're talking like 6 months later, it didn't take years. 6 months later, their score shot up to like an 85. Okay.
Wow.
So pre-intervention, these guys were a 3.8. Again, they were one of our higher ones. We did get a 4 once. These guys were a 3.8. And we got them. I don't even remember what the last check was insane. Like, again, it was cult like there though. So it was,
Yeah. So how do you link the awareness or knowledge of strategy to actual performance?
yeah, I usually get caught is a great way to do this. So we set up a feedback loop that says if you catch somebody honoring the strategy, if you catch somebody honoring the values, those kind of things, it's like a get caught moment. Some people get a little nuts where it's like a quid pro quo, like, hey, I mentioned this about you last week. You can mention it about me that week, next week. But it really does tend to function as a reinforcement mechanism for that. There are things about strategy that are wiggly, right? But one of the best ways is get your OKRs, your KPIs right around your strategy, and they're going to tell you the story. I won't have to do the survey. The story is going to manifest in those numbers.
Okay,
Your customer service scores
so
will go
essentially
up,
what you
and
do,
stuff like that.
yeah, and so the control group KPIs are going to improve, at a faster clip than the non-control group or the other group.
The control group versus the test group
Yeah,
KPIs are a little bit harder because strategy is usually measured at a more global level.
yeah,
What we're able to do at the test and control group level is surveys, right? That's going to give us, and they're like quick text, like 2-question surveys. Hey, 2-question survey from your company, chance to win a $5 gift certificate. It doesn't matter what your answers are. Great. But that's way more about polling than actually the OKRs. The OKRs are like, if you 50-person company, if my control group is 45 and my test group is 5, that's got to be done by survey because your OKRs aren't going to move around a lot when I'm messing with 10% of the population.
got it. Okay, and so what is the next the thing that you get the lowest score on?
We get pretty bad scores on manager check-ins.
Okay,
Like, how frequently does your manager check in? So we have a form set up for that and an education set up for that, right? The form structures this, and it's the employees form. We make sure that it's the employees form because their name's up at the top, and the very first box after that is what's your dream job. And what we do is we do this with the managers and we fill it out with them so that then they have it for their leaders. But they also begin to understand what it feels like for somebody to say, what's your dream job? doesn't matter if it's here or not, because it's a farce that you're going to come and join a company and you're going to stay there till you die. We don't want that. Nobody wants that, because if that happened, nobody would have any upward mobility. You wouldn't learn any new things. We'd love to have you graduate and come back. That'd be kind of cool. But we help the managers understand that you're not trying to get somebody to play the game and say, oh, I want to be a VP here someday. Have them tell you they want to be a boat captain. This is a great story. I was working at a Fortune 100 company in their supply chain, and I was looking for an analyst. And we got all these applications in. I found this guy with zero supply chain background, but he had a biology degree. And I was like, I want to talk to this guy. He has a capacity for complexity. He understands how systems work. He understands variations. Let's just find out. So I meet this guy, and I'm like, this is my guy. And I'm the hiring manager. So I have a lot of influence in this, but I'm in a big, huge corporate hierarchy. So there are people who are going to tell me no. So we do the interviews, we sit down, we do the round table. I'm like, I got my guy, it's Jeff. And they're like, absolutely not. Just no way. I was like, okay, heard. Let's back into this. What do you think the skill sets are needed for this? So this goes on. It takes me 2 weeks. I finally convince everybody. We bring in Jeff. Jeff is oddly still there 17 years later, but he's one of the best hires that I've ever made in my life, because the day he got there and got in there, I was like, what is your dream job? And he's like, well, at some point I'd like to be a boat captain. I was like, thank you for being honest with me. I was like, that job does not exist here, but I can get you the skills to do that. So since then, he's been able to do that job and also get his captain's license. Story for another day. The point is that when you find out what somebody's dream job is, you will immediately become aware of all of the stuff that's going on in your business that's going to help them skill build. So the other things in that form are, what habits do you need to build to get to that dream job? What skills do you need? What knowledge do you need? And what certifications do you need? The number of times that has happened, and people's dream jobs change, they do, but the number of times that has happened, it's just been documented and people get to start working on it, that I can give you a success story off of this. It's innumerable. It's an incredible thing. So we fix that, but this is part of what makes us happy, which is people can have the joy of meaningful work. Your work feels different when you know you're making progress towards something instead of just slogging through your day.
Yeah, 100%. And the retention is incredible, and the engagement and the capacity for change, like you mentioned earlier, is just to the roof.
Yeah, and they become graduates instead of defectors, right? So when we look at attrition and we look at turnover, we like to get really specific, and we say who here was a graduate and who here was a defector, because there's three types of turnover, by the way: graduates, defectors, and then pruning, right? So there are times when you're doing it because it's the right thing for the organization.
Yeah.
But for voluntary attrition, we like to differentiate between graduates and defectors, because defectors are just leaving you, and graduates are going on to something that is more meaningful to them, or going to be closer to their dream job, or they've had a conversation and they're going to boomerang. You're going to see them in 2 years.
Yes.
Which is really cool, really, really cool. So understanding your turnover that way is helpful, but that conversation is made possible by structuring the manager check-in and also making sure they're equipped with objective information, right? Because if you feel like your manager can just say whatever they want about your performance for the year, you feel like you're not in control.
100%. And those graduates also become a big brand ambassadors as well. And so when they come across, clients or future employees, or, they're saying great things about you that help convert, new talent or new opportunities, for sure. Or they become clients.
Yeah. Also super cool. We don't see that a ton on our end, but we have seen it, and it's just like, that's when you're just,
yeah,
it's hard to get much better than that.
Yeah. So what's the next one? The next lowest score?
Oh, I will tell you, a documented customer journey is almost always a gap. People think that they have something like that, and then when we ask to see it, so part of what we do, the third leg of the stool that I left off, is we do an asset analysis, not like, your hard and soft assets. I'm talking about, like, we look at, do you have an org chart? Let's see your last 3 years of a P&L. Do you have job descriptions? So when we go through that, we ask them for journey maps and we ask them for SOPs. And when we find out that nobody can provide us with journey maps, even though maybe a third of people will say, oh, yeah, we have a customer journey map. When we ask them to produce it, they don't have that. It's a great unlock mechanism for the design of your service or the design of your product. When people don't have journey maps, it's actually kind of troublesome because it's like, well, how do you know what to make?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we see that one a lot.
We do this thing where we have the 2 and 2 test for reports, 2 seconds to tell what it is, 2 seconds to tell you how you should feel. So if a report has what we call a high cognitive load, where you're trying to figure out what it's telling you and you're trying to figure out what to do about it, it's a bad report. So what we tend to do in those instances is say, do you have usability statistics or sorry, user statistics on these reports? We pick their top 10 reports and we just ask people to evaluate them, or we evaluate them, which is even better because if an outsider can tell you in 2 seconds what the report is and how we're supposed to feel or what to do about it, then it's going to be a much better experience for the people internally. So we call that cognitive load. That tends to be pretty broken. People have badly designed reports and they've just sort of learned to live with them.
And these reports are for the employees to use. I didn't catch the prior one. What is this report for?
Sorry. So this is internal. This is internal sort of status reporting, right? So this
Okay.
is like an operational report that says, defects per million,
Got it.
or a revenue per payroll dollar, right? So
Yeah.
things that are essential to running the business. What we find often is when we go in and we audit their reporting, it's a terrible situation. Executives are being asked to read tables, and what we try to explain to people is that if the more people that report up to somebody, the less likely they are to read things, right? So your CEO should be given pictures only and have them, right, just be able to say, oh, this circle's bigger than that circle. So that means we're doing better, right? Just really straightforward stuff like that is not present in many businesses. So when we do our BI audit, it's also something that we have a tremendous amount of depth in. So like when we're looking at it, we're being hypercritical. Like things that would normally pass as good in most organizations, it would get like a D- from us. We're just not interested in having people have to think about what the report's telling them. We want to baby food them so that they can get down to the business of doing the analytics, the click through. We want them to drill down into what's the root cause. That's where their expertise is important, not whether or not we're making more money than last year. That should be obvious with the 2 lines in front of you.
Yeah. No, it makes complete sense. So when you were working with private equity, so you were doing, I'm assuming a battery of these types of protocols. And what were the things that you were focused on, and then what was done with did that affect the decision whether to move forward with the transaction or not? And then how did you work with them post acquisition?
Yeah, in transparency, we haven't had a ton of at bats with this,
Sure.
and it's very, very specific to the acquirer, right? So imagine that they're super good at reporting and analytics. They're not going to care. They're going to delete that from our assessment because they just don't care. They're like, yeah, we're gonna wholesale change that thing. Um, if they have a payroll system and an HR system and all of that back office stuff sorted, they don't want us to go through and do the audit for what we call open market competitiveness. So if you are paying internally for a service based upon your payroll and all of that stuff, if you're paying internally for a service more than what it would cost to get that on the street, there has to be a tremendous strategic reason for that. But when the acquiring company, when they have 40 portcos and they're all on Paylocity and they're all on Workday and they're all, you know what I'm saying? There's already that backbone. They don't care about that stuff, so they'll
Yeah.
delete that from our assessment. But as that goes, once they have this information, where we think it's going to be most useful is if you're in a competitive bid process and you know that you can pay just a little bit more because there's all of this upside from our diagnostic, or where it says, hey guys, don't bother. This is going to be a money pit. Like, even though all of the other stuff looks like it's going to work, this is going to be a money pit. This is a dark horse culture here, that kind of thing. Post acquisition, this is where we're on the run up to that right now. Post acquisition, it's 12 to 18 months before you're exiting. How do we help you remove friction so you can ratchet up EBITDA and multiple without accounting tricks? This is actual improvement of throughput. This is actual improvement of net profitability, right? And so all of the things that we learn through the diagnostics that we have available give us what we call a global backlog of potential items to intervene on. Then management says, we're awesome at this and this. You guys take these three and knock them out of the park for us. And then we're going to come back and talk again in 90 days. And as you do this, these things compound too, right? So like, you could fix one problem and then 5 other things on the list are no longer relevant, right? Like, oh, this process creates this problem and whatever. We're like, yeah, we just outsourced that whole thing. Like, oh, so all of these other problems are gone. They sure are. You have one throat to choke. It costs you less, and now it's in vendor management instead of internal.
Yeah, nice. So how long does one of these diagnoses take? And yeah,
Yeah, so I'll share something with you here for a second and just give
yeah,
you an idea of. So there we go. So it depends on what you're picking, but generally it's 3 to 6 weeks. You're going to get a report out of that. And then, again, you weren't asking me about pricing, but essentially, depending on your package, if you're going to use us to make any fixes, we're going to give you 10% of the diagnostic right back. So it's like a credit to what's being done there. We have Atlas, which is the main thing that I was just talking to you about, like this real holistic, what's going on culturally, what's going on with people, what's going on with your measurements. That one's going to take 4 to 6 weeks, generally, depending on the size of the organization. If it's a 50-person organization, it's definitely going to be more on the 4-week line. And that is, again, us going through all of the business assets. But if you're looking at the demand side of things, we have something called Brand OS. And this is something that says, essentially, is your company better than your brand? And we're able to look at this both externally and internally. We have different levels of Brand OS. And this is very much AI fueled. So this thing is on a whole AI chassis. Atlas was built prior to AI. We are going to migrate that over to an AI chassis, but Brand OS is AI native. This is the operations diagnostic for marketing. This one is going to be about 3 weeks. This is on the lighter end because it's all basically yes, no, and very little quality questions. This is about, how is this thing running? Do the executives have visibility to things before they go out the door? Does your quantity of marketing match up with your peers, right? So this is a very yes, no comparative. We've got a sales process diagnostic. This is the one where I was telling you, this is every bit of 4 weeks, depending on the size of your sales force and how enabled they are and how documented that is. But, again, I can go on. There's 5 more of these things. All of the diagnostics are designed to be as quick as possible, as lean as possible, and as non-invasive as possible, right? We're not trying to make everybody go through a proctology exam here, but we're trying to be thorough about the things that matter to these different things, right? So when we're looking at the admin functions or we're looking at your BI maturity, these are things where we're trying to do this with as little pestering as possible, but we still have to be thorough. So there are things that we ask you to sign up for up front. It's like, hey, we need a 1 hour a week meeting that we just don't miss to make sure that we're clearing out all of the deliverables on a weekly basis so you get what you want at the end of it. So stuff that we've learned as administrating these for a while.
yeah, yeah. And these, go ahead.
Yeah, this one is one that is new for us, but is something that we were already doing. Every time we did a BI installation, we just didn't name it. Which is, if you have dirty data, you cannot make chicken salad out of chicken crap. So this is something where we're ensuring that not only do you understand your data quality, but what in the age of AI that impairs. Your automation and your AI cannot exist without data hygiene and governance. So yeah, anyway,
That's awesome.
I will regale you with all of these different diagnostics another day. But
No,
yeah,
this
Jay,
is great.
it really is more about what does the company want to know, and what do they already know they know, so they don't really care. But you know, they can delete things. It's very modular. It's all designed to be modular because you know every company is kind of a snowflake. As much as I hate to say that,
Yeah.
um, but you could have two coffee shops on opposite corners. There's two Starbucks on opposite corners. They're different companies to us because the people working in those individual places are different people, and the company is the people working in it.
On that note, I appreciate you joining the call today. We'll share with the group, and hopefully, we'll get more questions. As more people consume the content. So, thank you for joining, Michael. Appreciate it.
You bet, Jay. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Take care, brother.